All right, guys, I'm Nicolette, and today Brian and I are here with Teri Ivaniszyn. She is the VP of Operational Excellence and Trade Compliance at Digi-Key, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about what she does there, some of the things we need to know, different, tariffs and trade, all of this stuff that's way over my head.
Or in trade zones, tariffs. There's so much stuff you guys have to deal with.
Break it down for us and make it fun. Can you do that, Teri?
Right. I can do my best on this exciting topic.
All right. It is important, though. So it is important, and we should talk about it. So I guess, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we kind of get into the nitty gritty?
Oh, well, I've been at Digi-Key a little over 8 years, have experience. I worked at Ford Motor Company for 10 years, and then I also worked in the utility industry for 8 years. So kind of a broad background, coming into Digi-Key originally to help them with their quality program, and then was asked to take on the trade compliance world, and came in with a bang and has really been running ever since. So it's been exciting.
All right. And Digi-Key's really expanded globally, right, over the last few years. So there's a lot you have to deal with, across multiple countries.
There is, and that's what I think a lot of people don't realize. Even the thing that helps us and hurts us a little bit is our warehouse is located in the U.S., which gives us, I would say, an advantage at times because it's easier for us to ship everything all at once. But the other things we run into is, a lot of the U.S. laws apply as you go overseas, which can make it hard when you're working with different customers and you're asking them a lot of import questions that, sometimes they don't always have to answer with some of the other distributors that may have, warehouses located overseas.
Now, Teri, I read that you established the largest foreign trade zone in the U.S. So I would like to know, can you explain to us what that is and what impact that's had on Digi-Key?
Yeah, so the way they calculate the largest foreign trade zone is based on the number of packages and what's being shipped out. And because all of the other foreign trade zones that have been set up have been more for large carriers by ship, by train, they put them in those big containers and they ship them out. The thing with Digi-Key is, we're shipping out one box at a time, one box here, one box there, which has been very difficult actually to get set up because they were used to the big containers. So we would have to have the data that comes back and forth because of it being a single line item was it was something different than what the government has dealt with, what all of our carriers have dealt with. So it was a learning process for everybody involved, and it took us a little bit longer than most, and I would say there's other people that have given up on it because it was so difficult. Amazon, for example, does not have an FTZ that ships small package, so we were the first one to go down that route, I guess, be the ones that want to take on such heavy lifting. But in the end, with all the tariffs that are coming in, it helps us defer our duties, taxes, and the tariffs. So we're not sitting with liability on our shelves. So it helps our end customer and our supplier because they don't have to push the charges through to us, so they're not incurring the charges. And then our customers, as long as they're located outside the United States, we're not having to burden them with any tariff charges.
Okay, so wait, I just want to back up to something you said. So is each individual package treated like a container in terms of the foreign trade zone?
It is, and that's the biggest issue. That's why they consider us the largest, because each individual package versus a huge container. And we ship, on average, we can ship 94 to 120,000 orders a day.
Okay, how small is a package? I'm just trying to wrap my head around this because I'm comparing a big
components. They can be relatively small.
Something
they can.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So some of ours are even in the envelopes. So we have envelopes. So if you think about it that way, yeah, they can go in an envelope, and then our smallest box size is not much bigger than an envelope, and it can go up to. Our average line item is actually between 2 and 4. So if that gives you any indication, I'm shipping 2 to 4 components, and it can be, I cut tape about, an inch big is counted as one part.
Right. Right. That's pretty crazy. I mean, Digi-Key actually had some really cool stuff. Even like I remember years ago, walking with Dave Doherty through the warehouse, and I know you guys released this at EDS. You were showing some footage on it, but he was talking about like the tape counters, and they had built these things, but they were handheld at the time. They do some really innovative stuff in terms of like tracking and getting those pieces together. It's pretty crazy.
I was actually you bring that up, the big thing that he presented, how the tape is counting all on its own, the machine operated. I actually oversaw that project as we were putting it in. So the hardware, the software, the everything that goes into it, the engineering. It was pretty intense, but it's pretty amazing what those guys put together. So it was pretty exciting.
It's pretty cool.
Wow. Brian, you know what? She mentioned tariffs. I know you had some questions about tariffs. Do you want to talk about that now?
Well, I mean, we could talk about tariffs. I mean, here's really a question. What should everyone know, right? Like, what should everyone know about tariffs going on now and where they may possibly be going?
So the tariffs right now, when the new regime came into the warehouse, they left the tariffs the way they were. And you have people that are charging tariffs anywhere between 10 to 20% on the goods that are coming in. And which makes it very difficult when you're as hot as the market is now, and then you have the tariff cost on top of it, it's hard for our customers to pallet all of that and understand that that's an extra cost. It's actually started to hurt the economy. So what you're seeing recently is based on the economic environment, they're actually reevaluating the tariffs to help with the inflation and things along those lines, especially with the smaller companies. We've incurred millions and millions of dollars in tariff costs, and that liability sitting on our shelves is huge, and it shut down a lot of small companies that were unable to pay the tariffs or push them out. Even the system changes that had to go in place to try and work. It was a lot on a lot of different people. So we've been able to maneuver through it okay, but I feel bad for some of the small companies that you saw go under because the tariffs were just too much for them.
When you talk about how Digi-Key maneuvers, right? And let's talk about that model for a second. So with everything going on today, how does the Digi-Key model kind of overcome some of the challenges that are out there in the components market today?
Well, the one thing is I would say, we have a lot of different IT infrastructure. We have some things that are bought off the shelf, but we maintain a lot of our own systems that allow us to maneuver pretty quickly to the government needs and what's out there. And a lot of times you have a lot of legwork that's happening behind the scenes with the people. We try and be ahead of the curve. So a lot of times, I'm part of the ECIA, which is part of the industry, and there's a lot of times that Digi-Key's bringing the topic to the table because we keep ahead of what's coming up. So you mentioned tariffs. The other thing that's coming down is the Uyghur Forced Labor Act in China, which is a whole nother animal that we have to pay attention to, because now they're saying that if you have any products that are from the Uyghur location in China, if there's a certain amount, then you're paying more. We can't import them in. So, and then in Europe, they're looking at the plastic level, like how much is environmentally safe, and we have to give them the count of the plastics that are in our reels, that are in everything, and then we'll have to pay an import tax if it reaches a certain level. So there's constantly things moving, not only in the U.S., but in other countries that we have to be able to adapt to and be able to address.
So how do you go about, right, keeping track of all these things? Is it, you said you have a lot of built systems that Digi-Key has built. So a lot of it is, humans staying on top of it, but also building in do you guys build in like any AI or other pieces that help with this? So it knows like there's.
Not necessarily in this space, but we are working on it, but it is more a human thing. We have specific individuals that focus in on all of these different pieces of what's going on. I just recently finished standing up an entire tariff team that can address any types of tariffs that come in. How do we turn quickly? How do we maneuver quickly? Because not only do you have the FTZ, the other thing you have to work on is drawback. So can we get monies back from the government? And it's not always as easy as you think it is, because if you're the importer record, it's easy, you can submit your paperwork. But if you're not and you're working like we are as a distributor, we have the front end manufacturer that then has to supply us information. And
Right.
it's a lot. And those have been the different hoops we've had to jump through. And we're all still learning, to be honest with you. We learn something new from each other every day.
And I can imagine how complicated it gets. You having multiple manufacturers in each package or shipping container, right? In this case, right? Having multiple manufacturers, because if you have different parts from different manufacturers, keeping track of all that, and if it's going out to a different country, it becomes really complicated. And it almost seems too, like what we're talking about with the different laws for different countries, keeping track of all the different laws around it, not even just the certifications, like we have UL here and you have other standards, right? And how do you, keeping track of all that is like a big thing for all distributors.
It really is. I mean, and like you said, it's not just overseas. You have different laws that come up from like California or other locations where you're having to make sure you're complying with it. So for example, over in when you're in California, we have to print out anything that has, I would say, cancerous or anything like that. You have to print out separate labels. You have to have manufacturing labels. So there's a lot of work that has to go in front of when they launch a change. So a lot of times we're running to try and meet timelines. So something's going in place. So for example, the Uyghur China Act is going in, and we're running to make sure to figure out how much of that component do we have from that region from different manufacturers. So
sorry.
It's not easy.
Yeah. I was going to say, do you see with all the complexities that keep coming in, because it seems like they're just compounding, right? Do you see like teams like yours for, across the industry just growing at like a huge pace over the next few years?
I do. And it's interesting because I started out in this role in 2017, and my group has more than doubled because of just the complexities that are coming in and the laws. And, unfortunately, the war over in Russia hasn't helped either, because we also have to deal with who we're shipping to and who we're not shipping to. And it becomes very complex. And we've actually grown I have an individual that sits over in Hong Kong, and we're putting somebody over in EMEA that can help us with the laws that are over there, since they hear it firsthand. A lot of times it'll help filter to us a lot faster.
I just keep thinking about what you said earlier. Imagine a smaller company needing to do this and not having the, you don't have the budget to hire big teams or double your team. How do you even hang,
Well, I'm coming from Michigan, the big steel area, that came out at the same time as the 301 tariffs came out, and they shut down quite a few locations because they couldn't handle it. And we are seeing that impact. It is just, I think, people think, oh, tariffs are great. And I understand the reason for it, for putting pressure back on China, but some of it is really causing more of an impact on the U.S. economy and U.S. businesses that I think we're short-sighted sometimes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting too, because, you brought up the war in Russia, right? Like, we do have this global economy and everything is so connected. And anytime something happens, it impacts everyone, not just, the United States or, China or whomever. It winds up impacting pretty much the entire world at this point, because we do have a global economy.
Oh, you're 100% right. So not even worrying about whether they're buying our components for, things that they shouldn't be buying them for. They're also the biggest producer of some of the chemicals and some of the things that are needed to build some of our components. So it's looking at, we already have shortages in the market for, semiconductors, but yet they have a piece of that. So it's keeping our eye on not affecting the rest of our supply chain. So it's a huge impact.
So we talked about some of those, plastic in the UK. California has its own, are there any other common compliance challenges that U.S. manufacturers and distributors are really up against?
Yeah, I mean, you guys mentioned UL, so another thing that they have overseas, like, is the CE markings. The thing is and we want to be environmentally safe, but then when you guys are probably going to laugh, all those cords that you get to have all the different languages of what not to do and the safety of it. I mean, most of us just chuck them in the trash, Now we have they're requiring us to make sure we send a printed packet with everything that goes over that has a CE certification on it. And we're hey, can we give you a 2D barcode because it would save paper? And oh no, you have to send us the paper. And so just some of the things you look at and you're like, all right, well, they're very strict about what they need. And it's just interesting, some of the things. I'm trying to save the forest, but yet give me paper on my...
I was just listening to something in another industry, actually the building and construction industry. I was just watching a video and they were talking about something similar, using, environmentally friendly chemicals and products on the home, but then things that are not going to withstand as long as some of those things that we don't deem as, environmentally friendly, and thinking about how many trips you're going to have to make to fix that, the emissions in your gas and all these other, runoff consequences. And you look at it and you say, well, you're not looking at the bigger picture here, right?
Right.
It's a bigger picture kind of situation.
Yeah, and I totally agree. That we tend to, when something comes down, they see a sliver of it, and then you're like, well, did they really understand the whole impact of this?
Right.
And a lot of times we find out no, and then they go back to the drawing board and they change the way the law is because they didn't look at it, full picture. And then we're running again because they realize maybe they misstepped in some ways. So.
Right. Well, I mean, what's interesting about that is they're requiring to print it, right? And then sometimes they require it, say it's a power supply, and they require information on the power supply, like actually embedded on the casing. And now they're going to reply.
And now we have to sticker each individual one we send out, and the extra paperwork. And it's just like, well.
And it's like if it's printed on whatever the housing, right? Or I'm sending it via paper. Like, how many ways can you possibly send it? And to your point, I mean, it's interesting too, because why not have something you could scan on every individual item? I mean, we track everything with IP addresses anyway these days that's connected to the internet. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways to track information. Whereas if the piece of paper gets lost, it's on the housing, maybe it gets rubbed off or a sticker. If you had a 2D barcode embedded in it, or something you can scan, you're done. Like, you're done. You can just run your phone over, you got it, and you know what it is, So why create all this waste, all this paper, all these other things versus giving the information digitally that anyone could scan at any time, especially as items get passed on and recycled, maybe recycled up or changed, then you're just scanning it. And now the new owner or user or whomever has that information.
Is anyone really reading that thing? I mean,
no. Did you ever read the matrix?
Right. I don't read any of that. It goes in the trash. I mean, it's like, what's extra paper? You tuck it away.
Most people don't even read the paper that comes with your prescription. You're putting that in your body, right?
The paper that comes with my prescription.
I'm supposed to read that?
Right. Much less, the instructions or whatever, this other piece of the paper that came with a, whatever power strip or something, it's crazy.
Well, the 2D barcode, that's actually one thing I helped with the industry, is putting 2D barcodes on anything they ship in, because it goes right to what you said. Now I have that traceability all the way through, from the manufacturer to distributor to the customer, and everything it makes it a lot lot in the world of where
and
we are.
Counterfeiting too, right? I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and what happens when those printers run out of ink and there's no ink on that piece of paper, and or you have a whole bunch of blank ones in there, and it's just so silly. The whole thing's just so silly, So
it really is. It's just interesting that some things we are very good at, being savvy and technical, and then there's other things where we revert back to just being how many years ago? Give me some paper versus.
I do think, unfortunately, I do think a lot of times when it comes to government regulations, it is a little bit dated versus, let's be honest, versus what, industry or private industry or even public industry would actually do. When you see these bigger government organizations organizing things, sometimes it's a little old school, like, here, put a piece of paper in here,
Exactly. You realize some of the things with the government, they're further behind when it comes to to the electronics industry than others. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, Teri, from where you're sitting, with everything going on in the world, in the industry, what's your overall general outlook on the market from where you sit?
I feel that the market will remain fairly strong through the end of this year and into 2023, because we're still seeing a lot of end products that we don't have available when you're talking about microcontrollers, sensors, electromechanical, or semiconductors. And I think that you're going to start to see a little bit more in Q3, Q4 2023, where the market starts to slow down a little bit because more and more material is becoming available. And, I think there's more of a need for the semiconductors. And I think I just read an article, as a matter of fact, where a new EV company is now making all their own semiconductors in-house to help avoid it, the shortages that they're seeing.
It's interesting because I saw something similar too. I don't remember if it was the same article, but if you think back, let's just back up a long time ago when even computers first started, like home computers, like IBM was manufacturing their own cards, to go in there. That was the way when there was nothing there and you had to make it. A lot of companies were actually manufacturing their own components. And I think you're seeing some of that for the fact that there's these shortages and they're just not there. And for them to continue their business, they may have to manufacture things. So I think you may see some interesting new players coming out of some of this stuff that's going on.
I agree with you. I worked at Ford Motor Company for 10 years, and at that time they spun off they spun off Visteon, and Visteon was actually handling a lot of their microcontrollers and a lot of things along those lines. So they're still, they still supply to Ford, but when you look at that, could you see them purchasing some more of those places back up versus having them that as standalone companies?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's gonna be interesting.
Oh, it is. And then you're going to get to the point, what we found in our industry is things are very cyclical, and you usually see a turn up, it's about a 5-year cycle. They're thinking now it may be more of a 7-year cycle, especially where electronics are. So you hit that peak and then you'll see it bottom out because you'll get so much supply that it'll inundate. And that's really where Digi-Key soars is, even in the times when the markets aren't hot, we're still taking in inventory. And we are an inventory heavy model. So then when the market goes back up, we have a lot of inventory on our shelves, and we tend to fare very well until you start to see the depletion, and then we're in the rat hunt with everybody else at that point. And it goes based on how your relationships with your suppliers and, how do you get that material in.
Well, Brian, is there anything else you wanted to ask Teri today?
No, I think we had a really good conversation. I like some of the stuff we talked about in there. It's great. Thank you, Teri, for joining us today. Where can they find more on Tariffs or more on what Digi-Key is doing?
With the tariffs, we don't necessarily push that out there, but the CBP, I know that's the CBP website actually has a lot on the tariffs, and we spend a lot of time on that. But
That's
I would
your morning reading, Teri.
Yeah, exactly. Or nighttime reading when you want to fall asleep type of
That's
thing.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Just saying. But yeah, there's really, we put out there like what we're doing and how we can help. And the biggest thing for us is working with our suppliers to make sure that the costs are not going through to our customers. So that's, cool. We put it out there. We answer, especially in the beginning, we had a lot of frequently asked questions and answers out there, but I think people are getting more used to it, unfortunately. And so it's died down a little bit.
I have one last question. Is there anything that engineers should, be thinking about when it comes to all of this and they're designing? Is there anything from where you're sitting that might help the engineer who isn't really aware of all of the, details?
Yeah, and I think that's sometimes where we receive some of our pushback, because you have to think about it. They're not thinking about that added, cost that I'm going to have to pay on a part. And it's a lot of times they can ask us up front or ping us, and we try and put it out on the website, but it's really to me, we've had to do a lot of research on our own. And as an engineer, it is hard. And maybe there's an opportunity for us to figure out what can be put out there.
Mm-hmm.
I like the way you think.
Yeah. So I mean, besides the engineer, here's the question: what are some of the questions procurement people should really that they should know?
One of the things we do get is, and you'll start to see it. I've seen it even when I've been on Amazon. Where does this material come from? Are we getting the material because we do, like a manufacturer, we're really pushing our manufacturers to ship from other locations other than China because it helps us out. But we do have stock from multiple locations, and sometimes we record it. And if the engineer really, they can ask, honestly, what country of origin is this part from, or where are you getting it from? Because then they won't have, and it's the same exact part, it's just was manufactured somewhere else. So asking that question is huge, and we can answer that, and our systems actually tell us how many we have of each. So
that's great.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Teri. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.